do you think it's the right time for people to invest in
Yes,
Japan?
but I think also lately, I believe the government has started hinting on entrepreneurial incentives as well, right?
Because some people argue that Japan maybe will be like Argentina because of low yen. Because in the Golden Week, people were not able to travel overseas because, so we're kind of losing confidence at this moment. But
it is a bit of a balance. The government will have to figure out that balance. Take the opportunity that it's now, right? You can prepare for later on, but if you take the opportunity now, you will be in a very good place.
Startups and big companies. So in order to achieve innovation, which do you think is a crucial player? Startups or big companies?
That's a good one. I would say
So Nikos, welcome to PIVOT.
It's nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So you are a founder and CEO of Red Vest Mindset. So it's kind of a consultant company, but you do a lot of things.
Yes.
I would like to introduce you to our audience. So you were originally from Greece.
That's right.
And moved to the United States. You studied computer science, went to New York, then went to Silicon Valley. Could you take it from here? What did you do in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, so the reason I moved to Silicon Valley was because of a startup that a friend of mine was opening up and they needed the help. And so I figured that this was going to be a very good experience to grow. And from there, I ended up joining Netflix, which was in the neighborhood.
Netflix.
And it was a great experience. Learned a lot of things, how to handle, large platforms, big software projects, and so on and so forth. And one day, I sort of received a call from an ex-colleague of mine from that startup that brought me to Silicon Valley, that Toyota was opening up the Toyota Research Institute in the Bay Area to innovate in AI, robotics, autonomous vehicles.
Interesting.
And sort of bring Toyota maybe to the next level.
So Toyota had like an institute in the Bay Area.
Yes, so they opened that office and it was sort of like a big space of like different projects going on. And the idea was, we make good cars. How can we create even better vehicles, but also how do we jump into new technologies like AI, robotics, how do we bring that to the world, especially for a Japanese aging population, and also even designing new materials, potentially for energy and better safety and so on and so forth.
So Toyota was like in the time of the transition from a very traditional automotive company to a more AI / software /
exactly.
everything company. Yes,
exactly.
So completely a new industry.
Yes, and what was nice about that is they were open to recruiting talent from what you would say the traditional software organizations like Google, Apple, Facebook, and so on and so forth. And I thought that was pretty revolutionary. I think what attracted me to do this was, if we are able to bring such a big, traditional company sort of into the new age, then that would be something.
Wow.
And later on, as this progressed, I was invited to help in the same capacity here in Tokyo as.
Oh, so you moved to Tokyo?
Yes, I moved the whole family.
Whole family to Tokyo.
Yes. My wife and I were always wondering, it'd be nice to live in Tokyo for maybe a few months. And then I told her, your dream might actually come true with a little twist. It might not be 3 months. It might be a little longer. But yes, as we ended up building Woven here in Tokyo.
Could you explain what Woven is?
Yes, of course. So Woven was sort of an extension of the same dream. How do we make Toyota stronger in terms of software, in terms of AI capabilities, similar, more production-ready progress in autonomous vehicles as well, but also how do we help Toyota become a mobility company? How do you go beyond the car and you actually think of the experience in a world where you have all these things connected, robotics, vehicles, smart homes, etc. And it's sort of turned into the evolution of, you may have heard Woven City.
Yes.
And so it's sort of all supposed to come together.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we go into details, a simple question. So you worked in Netflix and Toyota. Which do you think is more innovative? Netflix and Toyota.
Okay. So each company, I think, is innovating in a different way. Honestly, Netflix has a very strong history that is very data-driven and very agile on how they organize and make decisions. And they have, brought really media to another level over the years. So I think they have very strong culture innovating, in software. Toyota, on the other hand, has really mastered, the production system, and I think that's created a huge advantage, over the years. In fact, the Toyota production system became the inspiration for agile software. So it's very interesting that now we're trying to go back to these origins, and I think so. Toyota's focus on the process and the quality. I think that's one thing that sort of Silicon Valley sort of doesn't necessarily have, right? Because it's equally hard work, right, to create something that can be so reliable that you can build one of the greatest brands in the world.
Interesting.
Right.
So you're saying that there are good points and bad points for each company, but maybe in a way Toyota can not only compete with Netflix but have better points or better innovative skills than Netflix.
Since you bring it up, I actually did this exercise on my own as I was trying to think, how do we bridge sort of the best of Silicon Valley mindset with the best of the sort of Japanese mindset. And I think how would we transform a large company like Toyota? And of course, beyond Toyota, there are big giants here in Japan, Mitsubishi, Mitsui, yes. There's large corporations as well. And if you sort of think deeply about what makes Silicon Valley, work, there are some principles like agility, freedom and responsibility to execute. And on the other hand, you have the sort of Japanese mindset, which is all about, quality, yes. care of the customer,
yes. Organized,
etc. Right?
Yes.
And so I think if we find a more structured way in Japan to bring the agility, I think it can work because we sort of adjust it for the Japanese mindset. You could get the same results with a different process.
Interesting. Yeah. So I would like to break that interview in 3 parts. Number 1 is Japan back? Number 2, we want to talk about how can Japan innovate, because you have experience both in Silicon Valley and also in Toyota, so you know a lot about Japanese companies.
Yeah.
And for the last part, we want to learn from you, Nikos, that maybe you can talk about why it's important to learn English, or we talked about that PowerPoints maybe are not good for innovation. So
that's right.
Let's talk about that. So to begin with, so we have the historical high stock prices, but the weak yen right now. So one may wonder that Japan is back. What's your take on that? What's your opinion?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I always looked at Japan as sort of the steady race,
yes,
right, and it fits sort of with the culture, right? I mean, even when we look back at the pandemic days, we saw that Japan was much more stable compared to Europe or the United States, right? And I think it's the same sort of with the economy, right? So I think Japan continues to grow. Let's say we're running a race, okay? So let's say Japan is running, at 7 kilometers per hour, right? They continue to do so despite what's happening out in the world. And we do have a lot of turmoil today in the world, between Russia, some instabilities, in the United States, upcoming elections. There is a lot of emotion, let's say, outside, right? And so I think Japan looks attractive right now because they have that steady, consistent pace. And so while the others are going up and down, and so let's say now we may notice a low, right? Even with China, right? So Japan looks very attractive right now, and especially with the yen being low, I think investors are starting to take this opportunity now more seriously. We're probably seeing after effects from decisions that were probably made a year ago, right, by investors. And so when we look at the opportunity now for Japan is, if the government is smart, I think that they should be able to give incentives to continue this longer term, right? Before we have another up and down from forces externally to Japan. The yen being low, I think it's just simply a matter of interest rates, and I think they keep the same policy. Eventually, interest rates will have to come down both in Europe and the US, and so by then, hopefully, the incentives for investors are still there, and Japan can sort of increase their speed from, let's say, 7 kilometers an hour to 10 kilometers an hour, right? While the others are running now at 10, or now they're running at 3, probably will go up to 10 at some point. But then I think we can create a more sustainable innovation pace.
Do you think more investments from outside Japan would increase? Because one is because of the weak low yen, and number two is people are kind of attractive to the Japanese stability. Do you think it's the right time for people to invest in
Yes,
Japan?
but I think also lately, I believe the government has started hinting on entrepreneurial incentives as well, right? And so being an investor myself into Japanese startups, it was very attractive that the government offers tax breaks, for example, right? And so I can even say from my own personal relationships, more people are talking to me now and say, hey, can you get me in touch with more entrepreneurs in Japan? Because we're interested in investments.
Interesting.
Because we feel something is changing. The incentives are getting there. And now, obviously, the opportunity with the yen being low can actually help bring that capital over. Yeah.
Because some people are arguing that Japan maybe will be like Argentina because of low yen. Because in the Golden Week, people were not able to travel overseas because a bowl of ramen may cost 2,000 yen or 3,000 yen or something like that.
That's right.
Yeah, so we're kind of losing confidence at this moment, but.
It is a bit of a balance. The government will have to figure out that balance. And I'm not a politician or an expert in those things. I just see the dynamics, right? And I think take the opportunity that it's now, right? You can prepare for later on, but if you take the opportunity now, you will be in a very good place. I think, legendary investors, always say buy low and sell. Sometimes they say don't sell high, sell when it's ready. Right. Don't wait too long to be high, right? And so I think if Japan plays a smart policy now, they could use that gap now to bring back a benefit as opposed to just getting back to the steady rate.
Yes.
Right?
So let's talk about startups and big companies. So in order to achieve innovation, which do you think is a crucial player? Startups or big companies?
That's a good one. I would say startups, and I would also add the government there just because we are talking about Japan, right? And I think in a way people are much more respectful of decisions that are happening in the government, and I think those, like I said, those tax breaks that were happening earlier, hopefully they can continue. But definitely startups always make the change, in my opinion. I think what large companies can do is possibly two things. They are sitting on quite a bit of cash. It's good to start thinking about investing, in the startup ecosystem, whether you're forming a fund or whether you already have one. You can look at those opportunities if you are a large corporation. But also, one thing that I noticed is that large companies treat startups sort of in a traditional vendor way. And I think if there was a better collaboration or a better sort of helping hand from the larger companies adopting the products coming from startups, I think you could have a win-win situation between the small and the large, right? So just to give an example, some areas I think that could be of help, right? We've all been talking lately about digital transformation and so on and so forth. Large companies have been very optimized, right, to be really good at what they do. So when you've optimized the process, it's really hard to break it apart, right? You have a system that works really well. Just trying to take it apart and reassemble it will take a long time, right? And so it's natural that the large companies have this momentum. But in some areas like operations, for example, there's a lot of opportunity there to use startup products to innovate. I don't know, digital signatures, for example.
Yes.
I think that could be a big deal. Even recruiting or finance. I'd love to have my expense report, click the receipt and be, automatically sort of gone for review. I think where big companies and governments can help there is, make the regulations a little easier for those things that affect the business operation, right, on the government side. And on the company side, since you have resources, human power, don't be too cruel to a startup that comes in with one salesperson, and one integration engineer, and then complain, you don't have this feature, you have this. But but they have something that is really well done, and sort of get that nice collaboration going and build more trust. And maybe some of the guarantees there, I understand, the startup could go away tomorrow. I think if you find the right contracts and the right regulations, you don't have to disrupt operations in that way. I always like to tell the teams, don't go from 0 to 100 right away. Maybe test this on a smaller scale. All these companies have so many departments. Just try it on one department. Test it there, make sure it works well. It helps the startup. It helps you think, differently. And if it's a success, grow it.
So OpenAI just opened their office in Tokyo. So what do you think? How can Japan, successfully integrate AI and robotics?
Ooh, that's there is a lot there. I think I definitely think Japan has a huge advantage in robotics. Being close to a smart city or a company like Toyota, you can see all the suppliers. The whole industry is very, very advanced when it comes to electromechanical parts of the robotics. AI coming on the side here, you might say, just easy. Let's drop the AI on the robot, and it works. It's not that simple because I think where we need to start thinking is more about the experience that we want to create. And that is, how is this going to improve my life? How is the delivery robot going to improve my delivery experience, for example? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But we have to think holistically in that sense. So who's going to think about that? In my opinion, it's software developers. When you give them toys, so to speak, to play, they are the ones who are going to come up with the ideas. They will talk to people. They will try to develop some software to make it work. So we want them to be happy. We want them to be able to innovate using these technologies. And I think building the right tools for them is really great. I think, speaking of mobility, I believe, at some point in the future, people should have a new job description. That say, mobility developer, in a way. Why? Because now we are trying to integrate these technologies so you have skills from one side and skills from another side, and those two skill sets we'll have to work together. And I think we will have a new skill set emerge from this experience. And in a way, I think we had the same thing happen with mobile phones.
Yes.
You know, who wrote the first mobile phone applications? It was all the web developers,
Yes.
right? And before them, it was the server engineers that were building the cloud at the time, right? And so I think you can see those transitions in technology happening when you kind of build the ecosystem of collaboration and you allow that to happen. You allow the room to create that new skill set.
What do you mean by mobility app developer? Because it's very difficult to build a car, you know. So what do you mean by it? Could you elaborate on that? Because app developers, to me, it seems like iPhone developers. So it's very easy to enter the market, but the car industry is so big. You need some skills.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. We've sort of have this notion that a mobility app should look a lot like a phone app. But the analogy stops there at the name, application. In my opinion, I think we are going to have a very different notion of what an application looks like for mobility. And let me explain why. So obviously on your phone, it's a two-dimensional screen.
Yes.
And it's at the same location every time with your face.
Yes.
Right? So it's right there. So you have already defined, you know, there's buttons to click, there's text to see, animations, etc. Now, if we talk about mobility, we're looking at a 3D space where a lot of people are moving around. And not just you, there may be robots and other devices, doors opening and closing, gates. And you have that device as part of your experience as well, right? So the way you would program this experience is going to be very different. Like the tools, for my phone, I can download the Android software development kit or the iOS developer kit, and Apple and Google give me all the tools as a developer to go play and test my screens, right? Now, how do you test in a 3D space?
Yeah.
How do you even define the beginning and the end of your application,
it's a completely different ball game.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes.
And so I think where the key differentiating technology and where Japan should be looking at, given that they have strong robotics and they have the AI, whether it's coming from outside or building their own models, is what are the developer tools that we're going to create? That's a lot of work. From just the ability to allow a small team of people to sort of even visualize how that looks like. You know, so suppose you come home and you're tired from work and you just want to watch your Netflix show, put your legs on the couch and just have a nice hot tea, right? And you don't want to do any of this, right? So that is what you're going to have to program. Somebody needs to write the code for this to happen.
Interesting.
Which means that they have to get the data from the sensors. When you arrive to your home, the door is going to open, your robot will have your sleepers ready, so all of these things.
Cooked tea.
Exactly, and then, boil the water for you and pour the tea, and then your TV turns on when you want that, right? And sort of all of this is going to work through code.
That's right.
But I can't do it today so easily because I have to code this separately, I have to go do this separately and this separately, and then how do you test such a complex system together, right? And sort of a lot of the teams I work with, this is where I try to get them to think, like, change that. Don't assume this is going to be exactly the same. We can change that. We can build new things to make that easy to do.
So do you think that in the future, maybe a hotel will own like a mobility system or a car system or car service?
I think so. In fact, one of my friends asked me if that would be an option. Like, so a hotel offering like a concierge check-in service, for example.
In a car.
They pick you up from the hotel and you can do your check-in, book your dinner, your spa, etc. By the time you arrive at the hotel, everything is already done for you. So that means that the vehicle and the hotel systems need to be able to deploy this And so I think that's where things get interesting, right? And the technologies, I believe, are there already. Today I can deploy a service in the cloud. It's just an interface that someone can go get the data and interact with my service online. And any device can connect to it and do it. The question is, how do we make this look like an app together that is easy to program instead of having to go and do all these separate things and then see if they all come together or not.
So what will be the operation software will be? Like, it will be like Apple app or what? Yeah.
The way I like to explain it to people sometimes is we're starting with the end experience as a goal. Back to the example of getting into your home and so on and so forth, right? Now everything else can be seen as just a component of that system, I believe, right? And then not to get into too technical details, but essentially what I think we will be programming in the future is a sequence of interaction with parts of the 3D space, basically. And as you move from place to place, the system sort of knows where you are, knows what you've done. It knows, for example, that you crossed the gate, and so you have been authenticated. Right? So all these things should be happening seamlessly, in my opinion. So when the platform that we offer to the end developer, to the developer that's going to make that TE experience for you, all they need to program is just that part. So they don't have to think about everything else. And then the smart city, say, or the smart home will know to do everything before that moment to make it possible. So it will have authenticated you, know where you are, provided all this information to the programmer's program, and then the programmer's code just works.
So it will be like a chain of reactions. Once you go through the gate,
exactly.
that will start the reaction.
We can build those steps individually, and then we can test them as a chain. And so that way you can allow the ability to move from step to step in a way.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. We'll see. We haven't built that yet.
I think that's the future.
We haven't built that yet, but I think it's worth trying something like that to simplify the way we build those applications. Yes.
So let's move on to theme number 2. So how can Japan innovate? So you worked in Netflix and Toyota. So how can Japanese corporations can innovate? So what did you learn from Netflix that Japanese audience can learn?
There is a lot of things, and if we had 5 hours, we could cover everything. I think one area maybe that Japan could really improve is how we provide the user experience. Typically, whether you're an entrepreneur or an engineer or a product manager, etc., you get really happy about solving a particular problem, and when you solve it, you sort of cheer and it's like, oh, I figured it out, it's done. In my opinion, I don't think that's the end of the process. I think you really need to quickly bring others into that and decide whether it's easy to adopt. And I think that's where some of the problems I've seen happening, whether it's a startup or a large company, it's the same, by the way. Where I see the gaps happening, is that ability to really simplify the experience as opposed to, let's say, focusing on a lower budget, for example, right? I think one example that we were chatting earlier was how do we set up a conference room, with IT equipment, and one time I had this proposal of like 5 options and so on and so forth. And I told the team, I said, I don't really like any of those options. Everything is too complicated. There's too many remote controls I have to deal with and so on and so forth. But they were like, but Nico-san, we covered every possible option. you can do anything you want in this conference. You can connect with Google, with Microsoft Teams, with WebEx, with this. And I said, I don't really care about having the ability to connect with every possible, technology out there. We should think about what is our workflow that we're trying to achieve and how do we make this productive for the teams. So as soon as you enter the meeting, you click and you can start. And so that was sort of a very different mindset that we sort of kept discussing, for the teams to understand. And that's just not necessarily for, let's say, internal processes in a company. I see that a lot also happening in products in the market, right? I forget, I had an interesting experience. I wanted to go to a show in Tokyo, and I wanted to get an electronic ticket. So I did everything online. I entered my information, credit card, everything. And I was like, wow, this is great. This is so advanced. And as soon as I hit submit, then it says, great. And now you can pick up your ticket from the nearest Family Mart and show this code so you can get back the ticket, and then they can check the receipt. And I said, wow, it was so easy up until now. And now I have to go out of my house and go downstairs,
get the printed paper,
find and make it the paper, make sure I don't lose that, and so on and so forth, right? So it sort of broke the experience. And I think it would have been a very easy step to just finish the last 10% and give me a digital ticket.
Any other example of like how your work has influenced, like such as Toyota? What did you do in day one to kind of change your mindset?
I think I didn't do it right in the beginning, Brian. To be honest, I made a lot of mistakes in the beginning. Yes. I think when you come to Japan as a foreigner, you have this notion, especially, coming from Silicon Valley. I thought I was like the best in the world, and so on and so forth. And I'm gonna go show them how real software works and all of that, right? And I did that mistake.
Oh, you did.
I made that mistake.
That's a mistake, especially in Japan.
I made that mistake. Yes. Usually I'm very friendly, etc. But we built a good relationship. But I was noticing a lot of resistance, right? And I think that's a very common mistake that foreigners do when they come to Japan, and they assume like we know better and we're gonna do it this way, and so on and so forth, right? Or look at me, I have all these credentials, and so on and so forth. And so I think what they don't realize that because people are very quiet, it doesn't mean that they don't have smart opinions or emotions. I was very frustrated in the beginning when I couldn't get a clear yes or no. Are we doing this? Yes, no. And they were very long, silent meetings. And so what I try to encourage, I think, is just to improve the communication, honestly. From the micro level to, let's just say, single team members to improve sort of the day-to-day communication, but also sort of leverage the love of process for the Japanese, in a way that would create an advantage. And so what is that advantage? If I really asked the Japanese employee and said, look, our process is such and such. We can document our opinions now. We can do that. It doesn't have to be only in meetings and so on and so forth. And I expect you, at the end of this to hear something from you, whether you write it up or you want to say something. And then people take it, okay, now it's my duty to do this. And so I think that worked pretty well when people knew that it was part of their responsibility to actually speak up or to say something. But as a leader also, you have to sort of present yourself with these openings, right? If you come out too strong as a leader or too much like I know everything, then you don't give that opportunity for the team to help you, right? So in a way, that sort of worked better when I sort of calmed down and I sort of, gave people the options to express, to express their thoughts. Then I think we had a good collaboration. I think mixing up also the team structure, let's say 50-50 or even 40-60, between native and non-native, employees, helps. It sort of gives that safety that you feel like, okay, there is enough Japanese people in my team that I feel safe, and then the foreigners feel like there's enough foreign people to feel safe, but we're also kind of together in the same team, and we can talk openly with each other. And I found that to be a more stable sort of team structure.
Do you think Japanese people speak up when there is a foreigner?
Not so much.
Not so much.
It's
It's
very difficult.
the opposite. So
sometimes it's also the language barrier. But I think if you want to bridge the gap to communication, then I think both the speaker and the listener need to make bigger steps, especially when we are, across cultures. Right?
why is that important to communicate via text at the beginning by document and move on to the slides or circles and PowerPoints and whiteboards?
Everybody in the company, you take any company now, the primary way to communicate your ideas is PowerPoint. Okay, I did not like PowerPoint.
You don't like PowerPoint?
I did not like, which means you have to put your thoughts into more detail and more clarity. And you have to understand. If it doesn't make sense to you, well, it's not going to make sense to somebody who is not a native speaker, right?